Today's case is a case that has been ongoing for the last 8 years. However, just recently, there were breaking new developments in this case. And since the new developments, I have received tons of different requests to go back and cover this case and do a deep dive on it. So, get ready, get your comfy socks on, get your True Crime University 10 to Life sweater on, get cozy. You're going to be with me for a minute today. Hey guys, I'm Elise. This is 10 to Life. Let's dive in. Today's video is sponsored by June's Journey. June's Journey is a hidden object mystery game that is sure to keep you on your toes and put your detective skills to the test. It's a free-to-download mobile game where a huge part of it is sleuthing out hidden objects in different scenes as you go. It has a super exciting storyline with all kinds of red flags, where it takes you through a murder mystery story set in the 1920s, where the main character, June, is on a quest to solve the murder of her sister. Solve a murder, you say? Now I know all of my viewers can help with that. Now what I love about this game is that it provides a bit of an escape for me from all the real life murders that we talk about daily. So I'm able to just shut my mind off from real life for a minute while still having the aspect of strategic thinking and solving problems, which I just love so much because it's also somewhat challenging. So it keeps my mind sharp and strategically thinking about things as I hunt for the next hidden clue and hunt through all of the family's scandalous, shady secrets. You can also customize your very own luxurious estate island, which is so fun to decorate. June's Journey is celebrating its 6th anniversary starting September 25th. Starting September 30th on the official June's Journey YouTube channel, they will be releasing a live-action web series with an exclusive mystery featuring real players. There will be hidden Easter eggs throughout the series and lots of chances to win prizes, so follow them on social media. Watch the series to vote on who you think the criminal is, and if you are right, you will receive a prize in-game. Download June's Journey for free through the link in the description box or by scanning the QR code on the screen. Discover your inner detective when you download June's Journey for free today on iOS and Android, and as well on PC through Facebook Games. 35-year-old Crystal Rogers was born on April 4th, 1980. She was the first child of the family, and Crystal's parents, Sherry and Tommy, went on to have 2 more children after having Crystal. Sherry and Tommy decided to raise their children in Bardstown, Kentucky. Bardstown is a quaint little town in the Nelson County, Kentucky area, with a population of just a little bit over 13,000. The city is often referred to as the bourbon capital of the world, due to the 11 distilleries within a 16-mile radius of downtown Bardstown, so bourbon lovers often go there to try all of them out. Unfortunately, not a whole lot other is known about Crystal's personal life and the background of her life. One thing we do know, though, about Crystal is that she was a mother, and her children were her absolute pride and joy. Crystal began having children pretty young and was married to the father of her 3 daughters and 1 son. Crystal was the type of mom to do anything to make ends meet and to make sure that her kids had everything that they needed and so much more. She was very protective of her kids and would get mad if anyone else would ever try to discipline them also. And she was known to be way less strict than her mom Sherry had been. But overall, it was clear that Crystal's protective nature, like many parents, just stemmed from how much she truly loved her children. But eventually, as unfortunately many stories go, Crystal and the father of her children split up. After just ending a very toxic marriage, she was now looking for somewhere for her and her 4 children to live, to find her soulmate, to find a new father figure. And when Crystal finally found a home, she met the landlord whose name was Brooks Houck. And Brooks' family was a very prominent family in the small community. They were known for owning many rental properties in the area as well as the construction work that they did. Brooks' brother was part of the police department, and in 2014, Brooks himself even ran for sheriff in this small town of Bardstown. So to say that they were well known in that small town is basically an understatement. So Crystal and Brooks hit it off very quickly and quickly began dating, not too long after meeting. They then found out that they were expecting, and they had their son Eli in 2013. But Crystal's family started noticing that things were a little bit off with Brooks. Brooks seemed to be very distant from Crystal's 4 children. More specifically, they were not treated with the same level of respect and care that he treated Eli with. There was a clear divide, and Brooks made it known that Crystal's pre-existing 4 kids were hers, and hers only. Even though they all lived together and most families just share the groceries, for example, that didn't seem to be the case for them. Brooks would always buy the groceries for Eli, but would make it clear that Crystal needed to buy anything for the other 4 children, because again, they were not his. Now, to a degree, I can kind of understand a little bit if it was for financial reasons, because feeding 4 kids can be really expensive. But if I was living with a partner and their kids, and then we had a child together, I know I would do my absolute best to treat and love every child like they were my own. But Brooks didn't seem to really love or treat those kids as if they were his own, which isn't a very ideal situation for kids to be growing up in. The self-esteem issues, the resentment, it is not a healthy living environment. Now, we all know that the 4th of July weekend can bring in some really fun events, especially in small towns. It's usually full of events like barbecues, fireworks shows for just days on end, and that is no different in Bardstown. But in 2015, the 4th of July weekend ended up being different from all of the others for Crystal and her family. On Sunday, July 5th, 2015, Crystal's mother, Sherry, received a text message from Crystal's daughter, Kylie. And in that message, Kylie had asked Sherry if she had heard from her mom, Crystal. Sherry replied that no, she hadn't. Crystal usually responded to people pretty quickly too, but Sherry didn't really think much of it. So she sent Crystal a text that Kylie was looking for her and that she needed to get back with her before continuing on with her day. It wasn't until a few hours later in the evening when Kylie texted her again and asked her for a second time if she had heard from Crystal, and that's when she began to feel like something wasn't quite right. Crystal hadn't responded to her earlier message and apparently wasn't answering her kids' messages either, which made her mother worry a lot. So Sherry immediately called Crystal, who didn't answer. So she began calling Crystal's friends and other family members to see if anyone had heard from her or knew where she was. At that point, Sherry was keeping her cool, telling herself that there could be a number of good reasons as to why Crystal wasn't answering. Not to get carried away yet, there could be so many reasons. It's a holiday weekend. Who knows what's really going on? It wasn't until Crystal's sister Brooke called Sherry, not knowing anything about Kylie's text that day, and asked if she had heard from Crystal, because she hadn't heard from her in 2 whole days. And that is when the panic really set in. This was 100% not a normal thing for Crystal to just do, to ignore everyone, especially to not even be in contact with her kids, of all people. So Sherry, Tommy, and Crystal's brother Casey immediately went down to the sheriff's office to file a missing persons report. But on their way to file Crystal as a missing person, Sherry had actually seen Brooks. So she asked Brooks if he had seen or talked with Crystal, to which he responded no, he had not. Sherry said that when she told Brooks that she was filing a missing persons report, he said in a very calm and even tone, "Well, I think that's what you should do," and then just let Sherry leave, without offering to go with her, or even slightly acting worried as if he was worried and that nobody had seen or heard from Crystal in days.
You saw Brooks, the father of Crystal's 2-year-old, driving the next morning, right, with the 2-year-old in the car. Why did you think that was notable, Brooke?
Because if Crystal didn't have him, I did.
The baby?
Yes, he had the baby. So when he had the baby, red flags went up with me because she wouldn't have left him.
While they were at the police station, Crystal's ex-husband's son called them and said that he saw a car along mile marker 14 on the Bluegrass Parkway that looked very similar to Crystal's red Chevrolet Impala. So the 3 of them got into the car and rushed to where this car was seen. As soon as they turned the corner and the car was in sight, Casey immediately knew that it was Crystal's and that something had to be incredibly wrong for nobody to have heard from her and for her car to be on the side of the highway without her inside of it. They knew the severity of what was going on, and they called the police to come and investigate the car so that nothing would be contaminated or ruined. When police arrived at the scene, they noticed a few major things right off the bat. The back passenger tire was low, and it had left black marks leading from the parkway to the side of the road. However, both Tommy and Casey noticed that the tire wasn't completely flat or popped. Tommy thought that it was odd that she would have even pulled over on the highway for a low tire in general. They also noticed that Crystal's keys were still in the ignition. Her purse was in the passenger seat, and her cell phone was in the console. These were all things that Crystal would definitely not have left behind for any reason. If her family and law enforcement hadn't known any better, it looked as if Crystal had pulled over because of the low tire, gotten out of the car, and then vanished into thin air. None of it was making any sense. Even if Crystal had pulled over because she was worried about the tire, that didn't explain why everything else would be left inside the car, especially her phone, because they figured that she would have called her dad or her brother for some help or some advice about the tire, and it wasn't something that she would have tried to fix herself. It wasn't adding up. There was one more thing that stuck out to Crystal's family that police may not have noticed as being weird initially. Her family said that anytime she drove, she had the seat leaned all the way back so that she could drive with her leg propped up on the side of the seat. And when the car was found, the seat was leaning all the way up in a position that Crystal very rarely ever had it in. So that left them wondering if Crystal possibly wasn't the last person to have been driving her car. Like we see in so many cases, her disappearance didn't seem to be taken as seriously as it should. Crystal's brother claims that once police arrived at the scene to check her car, they searched the area near the car and the parkway for about 10 minutes, saw no evidence of Crystal being there, then they just stopped the search. Crystal's family would be the ones that led searches for her for almost daily over the next 6 months. Now, due to Brooke's previous behavior, when Crystal went missing, the Ballard family instantly pointed fingers at Brooks and were not quiet about the fact that they believed that he knew more than he was letting on. Crystal's family found it awfully weird that they had been the ones to notice that Crystal hadn't been in contact with anyone in 2 days. Because wouldn't her boyfriend, who she lived with, have noticed something was off here? Crystal's family said that Brooks also began acting like he had something to hide and wouldn't even offer to help in any of the searches for Crystal.
Some people have accused you of not being involved enough in the search efforts. What's your response?
That is a great question, and one I certainly appreciate you asking me. And that is all of my efforts in searching for her have been done behind the scenes with the Nelson County Sheriff's Office.
Like what?
Detective Snow, who's leading the investigation, and Jason Allison, who's a deputy there assisting him, along with the Kentucky State Police Agency Post Number 12.
Brooks was brought into the Nelson County Sheriff's Office on July 8th, and he was questioned. He told investigators that on the night of the 3rd, the couple had gotten home around 12:30 a.m. from his family's house that they had called the farm. He said that day they hung out with family, they fed the cows, and they had some burn piles to get rid of waste. He even said that Crystal, their son Eli, and himself went on a walk at the farm that night, even though it was pretty late and it was a cold and rainy night out. Brooks claimed that when they got home, he went right to sleep, and the last he saw, Crystal was lying next to him, wide awake, playing games on her phone.
All right. Fair enough?
Yes.
So you guys get home 20 minutes after 12, right thereabouts. I think you said you went to bed first. Do you remember about how long you were home before you went to bed?
I went to bed immediately.
So when you guys got in, you went and did your nightly routine, and you're going to bed. I think you told me that she stayed up, and Eli, did he stay up as well?
He was.
And where was she at when?
If there's any activity going on in the house, he doesn't want to go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
If everybody turned the lights out and we just got in the bed, he's going to follow us and there and lay down with us. But if I go to bed
and she stays up, he's not going to come in there to bed till all the lights are out and then she goes to bed. If I was doing something out there and she was in the bed, he's going to stay up with me until the lights are out until I go in there. Do you see what I'm...
Sure.
Yeah. So that's what
so he's going to stay up with mom. Right. So, and before you went to bed, or as any conversation, I know you told me that you all had a conversation Friday evening sometime about the kids. We'll talk about that in a minute, but you said you all talked about the kids Friday evening. Does that conversation bleed over to when you get home, or is that conversation done?
No, whenever I got home, I went to bed. I mean, it was relatively, quickly when I got in there. Okay. The conversation does not bleed over.
Okay. So you go to bed, she stays up. What's she doing?
She's just on her phone playing. I don't know what game, but she normally plays a game.
Right.
Some kind. She's got several of them on there, but I don't know which one.
Okay. So she's on her phone, messing around, doing whatever, and you go to bed. Do you know what time Eli came to bed, or she put him into bed?
I don't know. I
don't have any idea.
When he woke up the next morning on the 4th, Crystal wasn't in bed, and her car wasn't out front. He later said in an exclusive interview with Nancy Grace that he didn't think it was odd that she was gone because sometimes when they got into an argument, she would go and stay at her cousin Sabrina's house for days at a time. Now, this in itself didn't make a whole lot of sense because he told detectives that they hadn't even gotten into an argument that night.
We have had a stress relationship at times, and one of the ways that Crystal has always chose to cope or to deal with that is by going to a young woman's name, Sabrina, that is her cousin, her dad's brother's daughter, whom she's very close to. And she spent the night there on several occasions.
When you say several, do you mean 1, 3, 20?
In the neighborhood of 4 to 6.
Sabrina was more than willing to do interviews with investigators and told them that in the last 3 years that Brooks and Crystal had been together, Crystal had only come to her house 2 times when the couple had gotten into an argument. She added that the first time that Crystal came, it had only been for an hour, and the second time, it had only been for 2 hours. Yet Brooks was leading investigators to believe that Crystal would be gone for days on end whenever they fought, which was making her disappearance seem almost normal. However, to everyone else, clearly, her going to Sabrina's was basically to just take a quick step back from the situation, get some fresh air, before ultimately going home just an hour or 2 later. So why were the stories so conflicting? During Brooks' entire interview, he also showed no emotion or worry for where Crystal was. He painted himself as this amazing person who stayed home with the kids while Crystal and her sister Brooke would just often go out and party. He also got defensive at many times, making excuses for why he didn't remember certain times and dates and who certain calls in his phone log were from.
And my wife wasn't with me in the bed, as is normal, which might not be normal for you, I don't know, but for me, it would be normal, particularly if my wife's a late sleeper, which mine is as well on Saturdays, for her to be there in the bed when I get up. So if she were not, probably the first thing I would do would be to call her to find out where she was.
But what you're not aware, what you're missing is a lot of times that her and Brooke, her sister, or Sabrina, a lot of these girls that they do all these, they go out and do stuff. Sometimes they do these, and this is going to be embarrassing for me to talk to you about, but I'm wanting to get everything cleared up as quickly as I can. They do these fantasy parties. All these girls get together. They talk about and do whatever, and it's not uncommon for them, when they go out and party, they stay out the better part of the night, if not the whole night. So, and of course, I always have the children, during that. They don't take the kids to that. Matter of fact, I take care of some of their other children while they're the ones going. It's not uncommon because they know I don't get into all that stuff, and they know that I'm a man, don't get me wrong. Understand that, a white-blooded American male. And there's no sense, I'm not telling you anything different, but they do all these parties and order all this stuff. Well, who gets the kids? I'm good enough to get the kids for all this, and I'm a good enough person to do that. And then when everybody sees a little bit of distress, they're going to throw me under the bus. They need to re-examine all these other actions, how, you know, and I can understand the family wanting to vent and stress, and it makes perfect sense to me, but these people know me better than what's going on, and before this is all over and done with, you all are too, but it bothers me because not only have I been a victim, I can't even, my mind's not even where it should be because I'm trying to protect Eli from this, and he's the most important person that I'm trying to protect. I don't care about them dragging my name through the mud right now because I'm wanting to keep the main focus and emphasis on bringing her back safely and as quickly as possible, but it really bothers me what's being done in the method that everybody's pursuing and doing, because what's going to happen is I don't want their apology, I don't want nothing from them, but then after this is all said and done, they're going to sweep it under the rug, and then they're just going to forget about what they've done to me in the process. What I've got to be faced with.
Brooks's call log showed that he had received a call around 12 a.m. on the 3rd, when he and Crystal were allegedly on their way home. When investigators had asked who called him, especially at such a late hour, lasting only 13 seconds, he first responded that he wasn't sure who had called him. He told the detectives to simply just call the number back, which they decided to do together. They discovered that the call was from a man named Steve Lawson, who worked for Brooks. He asked Steve what they had talked about that night at such a late hour, to which Steve responded that he was only calling him with a question about a rental property, as he owned many rentals around town. Steve said that it was a fairly quick call because Brooks told him that he would have to call Crystal to get the answers to his questions and would get back with him. Now, that statement was one of the first things that investigators would clock about his story, because according to his own recount of that night, Crystal was in the car next to him on their way home, even though Steve had just told them that Brooks said he'd have to call Crystal for the answer.
I said it is a very difficult and trying time, but I appreciate you saying that. But hey, I need your help while I got you on the phone here. Do you remember the other night you called me really, really late, and I forgot what you asked me. Can you? I guess we wasn't on the phone. I might have been tired. I know it was pretty late at night. Can you remember what you asked me or what you were after? I can't remember.
Yes, sir, I can. I called to ask you for them numbers for a house.
Oh, for a rental house.
Yes, sir,
And
I did.
and what did I forgot? What did I tell you?
You told me that you would call, what's her name, Katie or whatever, she handles all that.
Crystal.
Crystal, okay, I apologize.
Yeah.
And you said she handles all that, and that you would get back with me on it.
All right. Thank you so much, now.
Hey, if there's anything I can do, you give me a call.
Thank you. You have a good night now.
Yes, sir. God bless you.
Thank you.
Okay. So that begs a question in my mind.
All right.
If she's in the truck next to you when he called, why would you need to call her about getting numbers for rental property?
Because being that late at night, we're headed to the house. You know, I just wouldn't. She normally's not going to deal with stuff that late. And I mean, I probably didn't even look at the phone to see who it was calling me. I'm sure I just answered it. You know.
But he said you told him that you'd need to call her.
All right.
Why would you need to call her? I mean, that's an odd phrase for someone who's sitting next to you in the truck. Do you understand? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. But I mean, that's what if that right there is what I told him, that right there is what I told him. We wasn't on the phone that long, but normally I would just, she handles all that, and that's what I would do. She's not going to want to mess with that kind of stuff that late. I'm sure I'll probably try to answer the phone really quickly, so that it wouldn't, a lot of times after I get moving, Eli goes to sleep, you know. Sometimes he goes to sleep in the truck, sometimes he doesn't. So if you want to call him, you got his number and everything, if you want to call him, you know, you can call him.
Brooks claimed that the next morning, once he woke up to find Crystal gone, he He got their son ready and went on about their usual morning, not wanting to call or disturb Crystal if she was at Sabrina's, because apparently he was afraid of making all of the argument and the things worse between them. So after he fed Eli and got him ready for the day, they went back to the farm for a family 4th of July party. But again, he initially said that there was no argument, so that didn't really add up either. And I don't know about you, but if they did have a fight, I don't know how he could just go and celebrate the holiday knowing things were so tense and not being sure of where she was. Plus, we also know he said they had a 4th of July party, there were burn piles, and for me, a big red flag that always goes off is anytime somebody willingly mentions a burn pile that coincidentally coincides with somebody who has either turned up to be missing or murdered. It's almost as though, in my opinion, they're trying to get ahead of things and ahead of the story as to explain why things were burned. Potential evidence burned away? Potential DNA burned away? What do you think? I mean, a burn pile coupled with the conflicting stories about their arguments, about Crystal being with him, the math ain't math in here, something feels off. About a week after Brooks' interrogation, on July 18th, Brooks' brother, Nick Houck, was brought in for questioning. Now, Nick was actually an officer for the Bardstown Police Department, and it was very, very clear from the start that Nick didn't want Brooks to do any police interviews and was even heard in Brooks' interrogation calling him and basically telling him that detectives were going to try and twist things in their favor and not to talk to them. Investigators had found out prior to this interrogation that on the night of the 3rd, Nick had taken a squad car out to the farm. And police found that to be a bit odd and decided to take the squad car in for further investigation. When detectives did a luminol test, they found bodily fluid all in the back of the car, as well as on a blanket that was in the trunk of the car.
You take that car home with you. It's a take-home car.
Yes.
Nobody else uses it unless something was to come up.
The only other person that's used that car is Tom Blair. It was issued to him first, and then it was passed down to me.
Okay.
But that's that's been a while back.
Yeah.
How long has that been, you think?
That's been a couple of years.
Okay. Cardboard box with some extra stuff in it. Fire extinguisher.
Hats, just rain jackets.
Hats, rain jackets.
I mean, I could sit here and try to tell you every item. I probably didn't come up with half of them.
When they took your car, when the PD took your car from your house, what was in the trunk then?
Well, it's this morning grand jury came up with just all the stuff I just told you. But there was also one other thing I can remember that was there was just a regular blanket for moving. You know, where I moved from 104 Glenview Drive to where I'm at now, I took the blanket that was there and I just put it between furniture to keep it from marring up the finish on it. As it went down the road, I guess it was going to jingle around and.
In the trunk of your cruiser? Mm-hmm. You had furniture in the trunk?
No, I didn't. No, what I did, I got the blanket at the farm. I used it, and then I was going to take it back in a few days. I forgot about it, so it's sitting there in the trunk, But no, I used my trailer and truck.
Okay. So instead of putting it in the.
Even though they already knew the answer, they asked him if there would be any reason for blood to be in the trunk of his cruiser, to which he just adamantly, completely denied, multiple times. He is extremely calm and collected through his entire interrogation, almost as if he had practiced the entire thing.
So, I mean, we're going to call it like it is.
Mm-hmm.
Is it you don't want to remember, or can you remember?
I can't remember.
Okay. Because this is what's happened. You made a phone call. He was up here. Within 2 hours of him leaving here, both of y'all were on the road, on the way to the farm, and the camera shows that. Mm-hmm. Time and date stamp. Phone call. Time and date stamped. You're out there. What went on while you were out there at the farm?
Yeah, if I knew, I'd tell you. I mean, I wish I could give you a detailed written statement. I don't know.
I guess to kind of jump back to the cruiser here for a minute. Is there any reason that there'd be any blood in the trunk of your cruiser?
No reason at all.
So you don't transport any biological evidence on a regular basis? When's the last scene that you had somebody that was bleeding? How long has it been?
Oh, I mean, I'm sure it's maybe a wreck or something like that. That's been a long time ago.
Okay. I mean,
I can tell you there's no blood in the trunk of my cruiser. I can guarantee you that.
Okay. Now, what about on anything that was in your trunk?
Nick told investigators during this interview that he had very rarely spoken to Crystal over the last few years, and that he sometimes saw her on the street, but that was about as far as their interactions went. He claimed that Brooks never complained to him about Crystal and their relationship, and that as far as he knew, they had a pretty solid relationship and didn't argue. To detectives, Nick's entire interrogation was more than suspicious, especially considering what they had found in the trunk of his squad car and his complete denial of it. They felt like he knew more than what he was leading on, so they decided to have him take a polygraph test. He was brought back into the office on July 24th, where an FBI polygraph examiner discussed his results with him, which turned out to be less than perfect.
I'm talking to you man to man as a fellow law enforcement officer. That the time has come for you to think real hard about the rest of your life. Okay. This is you. I'm not talking about Brooks or anybody else. The details of who did what when, can I tell you exactly? No, but I can demonstrably point out through forensic evidence already that things that you told us about where you were at various times are demonstrably not true. We can prove in front of a jury today. And start to, well, out of self-preservation, we all...
Man, let me just cut you off. I mean, do we need to take this any further?
I would like to take it to the truth. That's the whole reason we're here.
Is the test, though? I mean, man, you're talking crazy.
Well,
I mean, you're talking crazy.
Was that your rehearsed response to what was going to happen today? Because it sure sounds like it.
I don't know what it sounds like. I'm just telling
you.
Well,
I'm telling you what it is.
You're talking crazy.
What's crazy about it? Explain to me.
The accusations you're making.
Yeah, I'm saying you were involved in this.
Absolutely not.
Well,
none.
You already told me that. That's why we did the polygraph, to find out. Well, now we both know.
I told you what now?
You told me before you had nothing to do with it. Right?
Yes.
Well, now we're past that, because I've already shown that you did have something to do with it.
I don't know what the test...
I just showed you.
Okay,
I just showed it to you.
But I'm telling you, I did have...
And I'm telling you, you're lying. I mean, I can't make it any... I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but I'm just telling you the truth.
That's what I'm doing to you. I'm telling you the truth.
No, you're not. We're past that. I've already shown you.
I've taken the polygraph. Do you have anything else for me? Because I mean, I'm not going to sit here and we're not going to go back and forth like this.
You do whatever you want to do. I said I'm.
I mean, I want to cooperate with you. I mean, I'm not here.
Tell me what happened. Tell me what you know.
I don't know anything.
We're past that. You've already shown me that you do.
I know nothing. I'm sorry.
That's not true. It's not me. I just showed you. I don't even show people the results. I showed you yours.
Man.
And I even went the extra step for you to find out. Okay, well, let's try to nail down what you know more about. You know more about this? Who would know? Am I saying that you did it or you didn't? No, I'm just saying you know more than we did. Whether that's a simple conversation with your brother or whether you were physically involved out there, I can't tell you. Either one of those things would explain what I'm seeing. My hunch is it's something that your brother told you.
I don't know anything. He has not spoken with me about this.
Well,
he's my brother.
I'm glad you said that because he probably would know better than to say specific things. So it's a matter then perhaps of what you observed, what you saw other people say. I don't know. I wasn't there. All I'm telling you is objectively, that's what we do. You and I do. That badge on there is what? It's to protect society. That's what a shield is,
yes,
right?
Yes.
That's what we do. And I'm protecting you just as I would anybody else. But at the end of the day, I'm protecting one thing, and that's the truth. And objectively, looking at the facts, even if I were to take this out of the equation, why would somebody, on numerous occasions, in a formal interview, under oath over there, say something they know isn't true? Why would they do that?
At one point during his polygraph test, he was asked, flat out, point blank, "Do you know where Crystal is?" His response was no, but this turned out to be false. Now, I do want to be clear that the accuracy of polygraphs has always been a very controversial topic, but in my opinion, it seemed a little strange that he specifically failed the question about Crystal. Just a few months later, on October 16, 2015, Bardstown Mayor John Royalty, Police Chief Rick McGubbin, and City Attorney Tim Butler held a press conference where they announced that former Bardstown police officer Nick Houck had been fired due to his failed polygraph test and his interference in the Crystal Rogers case. His interference was cited on July 8th when he called his brother Brooks during his interrogation. Documents regarding the interference said, and I quote, "Making a call to his brother in such circumstances is enough to be considered interference in a criminal investigation, given Mr. Houck's experience and background as a police officer. In common terms, he should have known better."
Really, I guess if you think about it, he injected himself into this. he made that call. He was not necessarily on the radar. But by him making that call, he therefore entered into the entire investigation. That, yes, of course, that was the first and really only forward-moving thing that he did. The rest of it was more of in a passive way. His lack of candor stood out to me as much as anything. And like I said, it's a lot of what he didn't do as much as what he did do. That was kind of the balance that I looked at. That I think was as bad as doing something proactive, if you will. The fact that he didn't do what a police officer should do on either side, adverse or adverse. So.
A few days later, Brooks was officially announced as a suspect in Crystal's disappearance. Not only was he announced as a suspect, but the Nelson County Sheriff's Department officially said that they believed that Crystal was no longer alive. Months had gone by, and Crystal was still missing. The whole community came together, volunteering for search party after search party of all of the surrounding areas, Bluegrass Parkway, the woods, and even the waters nearby. Unfortunately, each search came up empty-handed, and Brooks was the main and only suspect at this point. And also, coincidentally, he was the one person who was not helping in any of these searches at all. Even though Crystal's car was a huge piece of evidence, detectives very quickly gave it back to Crystal's parents, who were absolutely stunned at this. It looked just as the last time that they had seen it, minus her cell phone, which they did not give back to Sherry and Tommy. Now, this case has gained tons of media attention, and a retired homicide detective named Dwayne Stanton was seeing the updates every single day in absolute shock and awe. So he reached out to the Ballard family and offered his expertise and knowledge. Upon arriving at the Ballard home, he took a look at the car with the rest of Crystal's family and immediately knew from his professional experience that the car did not look at all like it had been thoroughly fingerprinted or checked thoroughly for DNA. Dwayne said that when you dust for fingerprint DNA, there is a residue that is left over and visible, but there was no powder anywhere that they could see, not on any of the control knobs or mirrors in Crystal's car, nowhere. He also noted that the carpet in the trunk should have been removed as well as other items in the vehicle that could possibly have had DNA evidence on them. Now, of course, we will have to take this with a grain of salt. Dwayne himself had even said it. We cannot be sure that those things didn't happen, but like Dwayne said, there is no evidence of it happening. There was only one notable area that was fingerprinted in the entire car. When Dwayne and the Ballards looked further into it, they discovered that in the state of Kentucky, in murder cases, they are only allowed 10 pieces of evidence that can be sent to the crime labs for DNA testing. 10. That is absolutely insane, and it's no wonder cases like this go unsolved. There can be certain ways around it if a judge orders more than 10, but that is the basic rule. Now, I don't understand how you can catch anybody with such little amounts of evidence. This could be more than likely why the car wasn't covered head to toe in fingerprint and luminol tests, even though at the time her car was taken in for testing, if you can even call it that. And she was still classified as a missing person at that time and not a possible homicide victim. So would the collection of evidence have been greater in that case? The Ballards were infuriated by this and felt like the investigators had processed the car completely wrong. After hearing Dwayne's opinion on the car, they decided to bring in their own investigative team to take a look at the car. And on top of this forensics team, they brought in a cadaver dog, which ran right up to the trunk of Crystal's car and began barking continuously. The dog even at one point jumped into the back of the trunk while barking. Her owner said that she has never before jumped into the back of a car while trying to pick up a scent. As if Dwayne and the Ballards hadn't believed this was a crappy processing job before, they especially did after that. The forensic team took extensive photos of everything in the vehicle, and then they got to work. By the time they were finished, they had an entire pile of evidence bags with possible DNA and fingerprint hits. After performing a luminol test, they found an area in the back right corner exactly on the mark where the cadaver dog had been that was possibly a human blood stain. This entire time, the Ballards had what could have been a huge break in the case, just sitting in the car in their storage unit. Ultimately, after testing, the stain did turn out not to be blood, But it's still just so crazy to think that even if it was, it likely wouldn't have been part of police evidence and would have been missed. All of Crystal's family, as well as outside forensics teams and investigators, had been continuously searching for clues and possible evidence in this case, all the way up until November 2016, just a little over 1 year after Crystal had disappeared. And then their entire worlds got turned upside down. On November 19th, 2016, Crystal's dad Tommy had made plans to go hunting on the family's property, which sits adjacent to the Bluegrass Parkway where Crystal's car had been found. He and Crystal's 12-year-old son Trenton went towards the back of the farm, and Casey and his son Brandon took the front half of the farm. Casey recalled sitting in his truck with Brandon, listening to the radio, when they heard one single gunshot. At this same time, Sherry received a phone call from Trenton with something she never thought she would hear. Tommy had been shot.
And he was so upset, and he's like, Mama, Papa's been shot. I was panicking, I was trying to throw my clothes on and get ready, and I went in the bathroom. I told Trenton, I said, I'm gonna call 911 every day.
It was a single shot to his chest, and he unfortunately died on impact and was gone before Sherry could even arrive. Now, I cannot imagine the pain that this woman has gone through. It makes my heart ache for the trauma that she has experienced in such a short window of time. She and Tommy were high school sweethearts, and they had been inseparable ever since, creating the lives they lived and a family that they loved all together. Not only was she grieving the sudden disappearance of her daughter, but now she lost her husband too. In an interview after the fact, Sherry said that she knew in her heart that this was no accident. Tommy had been very public with his search for Crystal. He had taken the investigation into his own hands the entire time, searching for clues, leading search parties, creating maps of possible places that Crystal could be, and also gaining access to security camera footage across town. He was not stopping until he got answers, and she believed that the person who was involved in Crystal's disappearance knew that.
In what is being characterized as a death investigation now by the police there, do you believe that it was an accidental shooting?
No. I've been told it wasn't accidental, and I know the moment I got the phone call that it wasn't accidental. The police told us we're dealing with some very dangerous people, to be careful, and my husband was being followed. He told me that before, but we had to do what we had to do.
Casey couldn't recall if anyone had known that they were hunting that morning, but like many people in Bardstown, they had taken off work to go hunting since it was the first week of hunting season. It was well known around the area that the Ballard family often hunted on the property that Tommy had owned for nearly 2 decades at the time. So when police looked into the scene, they found a small opening in the trees where they found that the trees and brush had actually been freshly cut with what looked like a saw. Casey said he had never seen an opening in that area like this ever before. It seemed as if this was meticulously planned. Was it because Tommy was asking too many questions? Was he getting too close to finding out what happened to his daughter Crystal?
Tommy wasn't going to give up. He told me, he said, I'll spend my last dollar trying to find Crystal, and that's what he wanted. He wanted to find his daughter. That's all he wanted.
Trenton told police that as soon as the two of them got out of the car and turned the corner into the hunting area, Tommy seemed to have been alerted by something he saw. He reached out a hand to stop Trenton and kind of push his body back behind his own. Tommy then took his rifle off of his shoulder and looked right into the direction of where the opening was, and it was right at that moment that he was shot. Now, I'm just going to say this, guys. In my opinion, as well as his family's, Tommy had seen his killer, or had at the very least been alerted that something suspicious was going on. Despite this eyewitness account from someone who had been there and saw everything firsthand, investigators still didn't rule out the possibility of Tommy's death simply being an unfortunate hunting accident. But the Ballard family knew better. Like they had so many times before, they took matters into their own hands, and they contacted a man named Jim Kavanaugh, who was a retired special agent for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, also known as the ATF. Jim told the family that he believed that the clearing that was sawed open was a lookout point for Tommy's killer. It was about 72 yards from where Tommy had been shot to where this opening was, which is not at all far for a rifle to shoot. On the other side of the open area was the Bluegrass Highway. So someone could have very easily pulled off onto the side of the road, hidden by the other trees and bushes, and then sat, waiting for the perfect shot when they rounded the corner. Jim even said he wouldn't be surprised if it had been done by two people, one shooting and the other driving the getaway car, all to make themselves get out of sight even faster. While Jim was getting a closer look at the area where Tommy's killer had possibly been, he found a very visible area of kickback on a tree from where someone had leaned on this tree to shoot, and then the force of the shot caused damage to the part of it that they had been leaning on. The tree had a direct and perfect line to exactly where Tommy was when he had been killed. They even created a reenactment of the possible scene at the same time of day, with Casey right where his father was standing. Jim, however, was at the tree in the clearing, pointing a red laser light that had a clear and perfect direct line right at Casey's chest. It could not be any more obvious to them that this had been exactly what happened to Tommy. Tommy's family told their private investigators that over the course of the past year, Tommy had been keeping a box full of anything pertaining to Crystal's case. Every tip they had received had been written down, every address, every map of locations that Crystal could have been in, and even every security camera in the area that Crystal had been seen on. Sherry said that if Tommy wasn't out physically looking for Crystal, he was at home on the computer working on his own investigating. Sherry allowed the investigators to take pictures and make copies of everything, hoping that they might be able to comb through what Tommy had already found. And investigators laid out everything in front of them and organized each of Tommy's notes into subcategories. In Tommy's box was surveillance footage on July 3rd of Crystal in Walmart with her kids at 4:36 p.m. This footage is very likely just hours before her disappearance, and possibly was the final hours of her life. Tommy's notes also said that a physical witness had seen Crystal bringing the Walmart bags into the house at 5 p.m. that night. Tommy also noticed that in the Walmart footage he obtained, a white Buick kept going back and forth towards Walmart while Crystal was there. Witnesses also came forward and claimed that the white Buick was also seen parked in a strange place at the farm that Brooks' family owned on the night that Crystal went missing. And according to court documents, Brooks' grandmother, Anna Whitesides, owned a white Buick, but shortly after Crystal's disappearance, she ended up selling it. The 83-year-old grandmother was subpoenaed to appear before a Nelson County grand jury, but her attorney, Jason Floyd, recommended that she use her Fifth Amendment rights. Now, Anna was not seen as a suspect, though she did come into the police station for an official interview that has been kept confidential. Now, before we continue, I just want to ask all of you guys, if you sold your vehicle out of the blue one day, but it had nothing to do with a crime or the cover-up of a crime or anything tied to a crime, would you feel the need to invoke your Fifth Amendment right when questioned? Why, if so? Just curious. So investigators were able to find that car, and they found that it had been sold to a dealership, which they were able to track down and then search for any possible forensic evidence. When looking into the car, they found a GPS tracker under the front seat. So they immediately began testing the GPS, hoping it would possibly show where the car had been on the night that Crystal disappeared. But unfortunately, they found out that the GPS hadn't been in working condition since long before Crystal had gone missing. They also found what seemed to be bodily fluids, and they tested them for blood, but it turned out not to be blood. By 2017, no progress had been made in Crystal's disappearance or her father Tommy's death. Interestingly enough, in July of that year, someone had been arrested, but not at all in any ways that anyone was expecting. A woman named Crystal Maupin was seen on security camera footage at Circle K in Bardstown. She was seen getting out of her car and taking down signs regarding Crystal's disappearance. This woman turned out to be Brooks's new girlfriend. Now remember, at that time, Brooks was still the only suspect in her case. So new girlfriend Crystal was charged with theft for unlawfully taking these, but her bond was posted and she was released the same day. The Ballard family as a whole was just so in awe at the pure audacity that this woman had. Sherry was left upset and very confused. She wondered why Crystal wouldn't just help them. She also was left wondering why Crystal Crystal and Brooks weren't giving the family support if Brooks was as innocent as he claimed. Now, honestly, I don't think Sherry's alone in that thought process by any means. It feels very, very peculiar, very shady, unless you are just a new girlfriend scorned by the attention that your significant other's ex-girlfriend is getting. Why go and actively rip down the posters? Unless it's because you're trying to help your new boyfriend out. Even though Brooks seemed to be the only suspect in the case, investigators and Crystal's family were still actively searching for any other possible suspects. Now, if you remember at the beginning of this video, I mentioned that Bardstown is a very small town where everyone knows everyone. It's the town in stories where nobody locked their doors at night, and everybody thought this could never happen in our town. But as it turns out, Crystal's disappearance hadn't been the only mysterious thing that happened in the headlines of Bardstown. There had actually been a string of mysterious deaths in the town in the years leading up to Crystal's disappearance. And it wasn't just a Ballard family that had noticed this. In 2013, a local cop named Jason Ellis had been driving home after his shift when he noticed that some branches were blocking the roadway. Even off-duty, he wanted to make sure that this wouldn't cause any accidents, so he pulled off onto the side of Bluegrass Parkway where he began moving the branches off the road. While he was doing this, someone snuck up on Jason, shooting him multiple times, where he unfortunately passed away. Now, one of the more suspicious things about this was that Jason had still been wearing his bulletproof vest, but whoever shot him either seemed to notice it or already knew where to shoot that would actually hit him and kill him. He was a very loving husband and a father, and his case still remains unsolved to this day. Just 1 year later, in 2014, a woman named Kathy Netherland and her 16-year-old daughter Samantha also became the newest topics in the headlines. Kathy was a special education teacher, well loved by the community, and Samantha was an incredibly smart young girl, always taking her schoolwork very seriously. Well, one morning, neither Kathy nor Samantha showed up to school, and when police drove out to the Netherland home to make sure that everything was okay, they arrived to a truly horrific and brutal scene. The two of them had both been tied up, tortured, and brutally murdered, suffering both bullet wounds and stab wounds. Their case also is still unsolved to this day. Just 1 year later is when Crystal went missing, and the year after was when Tommy had been murdered on his own property. There was an entire string of senseless and brutal murders within just 3 years in that small town. A small town that was once seen as incredibly homey and quiet. Not to mention, every single one of them is still unsolved. Now, I'm not bringing up these murders to confuse you. Rather, I'm bringing them up because we're about to mention them again regarding someone who claims they knew what happened to Crystal and all of the murders that somehow tie in together. An anonymous inmate told the Ballard family's private investigator that he had heard that Crystal's remains were burned in some kind of arson fire. He claimed that he was told that Crystal was killed, cut up, and was burnt along with a garage-like building near White Mills, Kentucky, all to dispose of the evidence. He claimed that after Crystal was killed and her body was hidden in the garage, her car was planted on the Bluegrass Parkway to make it look like she had just got up and left her family, searching for a new life away from the one that she had had. And this was not all that the inmate claimed. He claimed that he was a higher-up in an unspecified crime organization, where many people would confide in him regarding the crimes that they had committed, including the deaths of Jason Ellis, as well as Kathy and Samantha Netherland. So investigators looked into these claims about Crystal's remains and found that there had been garages in the area that had in fact been burnt down. He claimed that he tried to tell police of these things he knew, but said that they were trying to turn things around on him and tried to get him to confess to at least one of the killings, so he then cut off all communication with authorities. 5 years after her disappearance in July of 2020, human remains were found near the border of Nelson and Washington County, close to where Crystal had gone missing. This had gotten her family's hopes up, believing that they might finally have some closure. Unfortunately, these remains were found to not belong to Crystal. By the end of 2020, the police had completely stepped in to take over Crystal's case. They immediately began serving search warrants, including Brooks's house, Nick's house, and their mother's house, as well as a storage unit in the area. The FBI told the media that they recovered several items of interest in this search. Then in 2021, the FBI ripped up the driveway of Brooks' home, which had been built the same year that Crystal had gone missing. Again, in 2022, FBI searched the family farm where Crystal had allegedly last been seen at. The farm was over 200 acres, but they focused on a smaller portion of it. They brought in cadaver dogs, drones, and excavating equipment. The search on the farm had lasted for 5 days straight. The FBI released that evidence had been collected, but they did not give any details on what exactly had been found. By the start of 2023, it had been 8 long and grueling years since Crystal disappeared. She has missed many things in her children's lives: birthdays, proms, graduations. She even would have been a grandmother, with her second grandchild on the way. Unfortunately, the Ballards haven't been able to have a close relationship with the son that Brooks and Crystal once shared. When Crystal first went missing, Tommy and Sherry had filed for court-mandated visitation times. They were able to see Eli every other Sunday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., but in 2018, a judge overruled it, claiming that the connection between Brooks and Sherry has boiled over to the point that it is not in the boy's best interest to spend time with his grandmother. Brooks claimed that Eli had begun asking him, "What did you do to Mommy?" and claimed that he was sullen and uncooperative every time after spending time with Sherry. Sherry has since gained support from many people in the community and held rallies to try to get some kind of visitation. Now, personally, Sherry also just doesn't seem like the type of grandma to put a child through that, so I'm not sure I believe that she was doing the things that Brooks claimed she was doing.
I've not seen my grandson. It was 2 years in November. I think I deserve to see my grandchild. I've even told him I would take supervised visitation. I've been denied that. I refuse to pretend like this little boy is not my grandson. I refuse to pretend like he's not my daughter's son, and I'm not willing to do that anymore.
In January of this year, the Attorney General appointed a special prosecutor to look specifically into the deaths of Jason, Tommy, and Crystal. Now, just recently, in August of 2023, a huge break in the case was finally made. For the first time ever, someone had been arrested in regards to Crystal's disappearance. But to the shock of quite literally everyone, and everyone familiar with this case, it wasn't Brooks that was arrested. 32-year-old Joseph Lawson was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, as well as a charge for tampering with physical evidence. Joseph's attorney, Kevin Coleman, confirmed that his client's charges were in relation to the disappearance of Crystal Rogers. Joseph is being accused of destroying, mutilating, concealing, and removing physical evidence related to the case, as well as aiding in the planning of the crime that intentionally caused the death of another person, also known as Crystal. So a lot of people are extremely confused on who Joseph even is and how he is involved in this case. Joseph has apparently had a pretty colorful criminal history over the years. He has had charges in the past of burglary, trespassing, assault, and possession of methamphetamine. He is currently being held at the Grayson County Detention Center on $500,000 bond for the conspiracy to murder charge and a $50,000 bond on the tampering with physical evidence charge. As far as the media has known, Brooks has only been the one and only suspect for the past 8 years, but somehow he is still a free man. The FBI has declined at this time to comment on the indictment, and they have not given any further details on if they will be arresting anybody else regarding this case.
I wouldn't have been surprised today if the FBI swept in there and made more arrests. That did not happen. But do you think that's how this case is going to progress now? I mean, how do you see it play out as a former prosecutor?
It's hard to tell without looking at the discovery, which is the evidence in the case. That will be forthcoming. I think there will be a question of whether or not that will be publicly available or not. But going forward, I think that will indicate who or what other person was involved. And certainly the crime of criminal conspiracy with any charge lends itself to an additional person being charged. So going forward, it wouldn't surprise me if more people are charged involved in this.
The only connections that anyone has been able to put together between Joseph and Brooks is that if you all remember from Brooks's interview, he mentioned that a man named Stephen Lawson works for him. Stephen was the one that called him just after midnight, late on that night that Crystal went missing, and spoke to him on the phone during that interview, remember, just for a few seconds. Now, Stephen Lawson does have a son named Joseph Lawson, but it hasn't been confirmed whether or not it's the same Joseph that was arrested, although my guess is that it is likely yes. There are so many questions that are still left unanswered, but hopefully this means we are even closer to finding out the truth of what happened to Crystal. I feel in my heart that the FBI is not commenting on other possible arrests because they are putting something together and don't want to scare anyone off. Joseph is due back in court on October 26th, so hopefully by the next time we are hearing any updates, things will start maybe making a little bit more sense. As recently as just days before filming this video, the family of the Bardstown police officer Jason Ellis has been doing extensive media coverage that they believe his death is somehow related to the Crystal Rogers case, even though he was shot and killed 2 years prior to Crystal disappearing. They believe that finding answers to what happened to Crystal will give them answers as to what happened in other mysterious deaths in the town.
We will never, ever forget what happened. You know, what am I trying to say? I don't know either. And that through answers, maybe somebody else that is going through something like we are going through, that they know that there will be answers.
And I think too, with the most recent arrest and there being some momentum there, I just pray that people who know things in any of the cases will have the courage to finally come forward.
We're still here. Hopefully, we might even begin to get some answers on who murdered Tommy as well, since I think at this point we can all agree that their deaths are definitely related. I think that this is just the beginning of finding out some real solid answers on what happened to Crystal. And I will be keeping you updated as we learn more. But we always say where there's smoke, there's fire. Now, literally, there was smoke and a fire in this case, but also, you have a police officer, Jason, who was murdered 2 years before Crystal. You have Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks. His brother is a police officer for the same county. You have the brother telling Brooks not to cooperate with the interrogation, not to answer questions, saying that the police are going to steamroll him. You have somebody calling Brooks the night Crystal disappeared, who has the same name and a relation to someone with the exact same name who has now been arrested in the case of Crystal's disappearance and murder, conspiracy charges. You have a Buick that was seen on footage circling around the Walmart going back and forth, then mysteriously sold, and the seller of that car invoking the Fifth Amendment right not to speak. I mean, the red flags, they are a-wavin', guys. And you would think and you would question, with so many red flags, with so many coincidences and inconsistencies here, and inconsistencies in Brooks's story and version of events, surely they'd have enough for an arrest right now. Surely they would have found Crystal, right? But if his brother is in fact a cop and is involved in anything somehow, maybe that also helps hide evidence more. Maybe then you're given the tools to cover up the crime more successfully than a layperson who maybe doesn't have law enforcement inside knowledge or connections. Also, don't forget that Jason Ellis, the police officer who was murdered, was wearing a bulletproof vest, but whoever shot him knew exactly where to shoot to hit him and kill him. Knowledge that a police officer may have? I don't know. You tell me. I would love to hear your guys' opinions on this case because to me, in my opinion, it feels too close for comfort. Do you think all of these deaths are related? Do you think that Brooks and Nick had something to do with the disappearance and murder of Crystal? How deep does this go? And who do you think is responsible? Sound off in the comment section below, guys, and let's get the conversation going. As a reminder, we have done a complete revamp over on Patreon where we are offering exclusive ad-free bonus episodes every single Friday, exclusive video bonus episodes all month, private access to our group chat on Discord where we talk about true crime all day, every day, so much more, private Patreon live streams, I mean, you name it. So head on over there. The link is in the description if you want to access more of that bonus content. And as a reminder, merch is available for a very limited time. We got a tiny restock of it, so you can check the website, get that, and season 2 will also be coming very, very soon. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in with me, and until the next case, stay safe.